In this video, we are going to discuss some of the more advanced capabilities of the Realtrac integration with the QuickBooks accounting package. Many of our customers use the straightforward integration, selecting their accounts and simply posting Realtrac invoices and purchase orders to the QuickBooks product. But some of our user base is more sophisticated and needs some more of the options that Realtrac provides. In this video, we're going to cover some options we have while posting invoices to Realtrac in terms of assigning specific income accounts for specific parts, or specific types of miscellaneous or freight charges. In addition, we will look at how changing QuickBooks items can have an impact on your bookkeeping. In regards to purchasing, we will once again examine the QuickBooks items that Realtrac automatically creates and discuss how we can tweak those settings within QuickBooks. In a moment, I'll open our accounting setup program that lets you tie your Realtrac system to your QuickBooks company file. But before we do that, I want to take a look at a Realtrac invoice just for a second. We're going to take a look at this invoice to discuss what normally happens when you post an item to QuickBooks, and then some of the other options that we may have. So I'm looking at a relatively normal Realtrac invoice on the screen here. We have only one line item on this invoice for some parts we produced for one of our customers. In addition to the parts, we are capturing some freight charges on this invoice as well. Now, when we post this invoice to QuickBooks, Realtrac will first examine QuickBooks to see if it knows about the customer this invoice is for. If not, Realtrac will automatically add the customer to QuickBooks for the user. Next, we examine QuickBooks to see if it knows about the part that we are shipping. How does Realtrac determine what the part is? By default, Realtrac will look at the drawing number field associated with the part. If that's available, Realtrac uses that as a distinguishing field that determines what the part is. If the drawing number field is empty, Realtrac will instead look at the part number field automatically. So looking at this invoice, we can see that the part is considered 08081978-02. Realtrac will search through the non-inventory part and service QuickBooks item list to see if this item exists within QuickBooks. If it doesn't, Realtrac will automatically create the item as a non-inventory part QuickBooks item, using the default income account that the user has set up in their Realtrac accounting setup program. All right, we've done looking at the invoice. Let's take a look at our accounting setup program. Since we're integrating with QuickBooks, we're going to pop over to our QuickBooks tab. The top half of our interface sets up our basic account integrations. Most importantly, we will tell Realtrac the names of our accounts receivable account, as well as the name of our default income account. All right, let's imagine we want to handle this part differently. This may be because we need to track our sales to a foreign country separately, or we occasionally sell parts that we want QuickBooks to tax. Realtrac lets you handle this by having you add special QuickBooks items into the Realtrac system. So first, let's set up an item in QuickBooks that we actually want QuickBooks to record tax on. First, I'll pop over to my QuickBooks item list and add a new non-inventory item called tax. I will leave my income account as the sales account, but I will signify that any invoices for this item are taxed at a specific rate. With this item established in QuickBooks, I can now add it to Realtrac. I will input the code of tax, and by telling Realtrac I wish to use it in relationship to our income, we will be able to select this new tax code for parts and items that we add to invoices. I'll show that feature off in a second, but let's also imagine a scenario where we want to account for our freight charges in a different income account altogether. Popping back over into QuickBooks, I'm going to add an item labeled freight and change its income account. Now in my Realtrac accounting setup, I will add the freight code and tell Realtrac I intend to use that code for some freight charges on invoices. Okay, so just a quick review. We've gone into QuickBooks and added two items onto the item list. One we set up to include taxes on the QuickBooks side of accounting, and another item to handle some of our freight expenses and note those in a separate income account altogether. We then use the Realtrac accounting setup tool to add these new codes into Realtrac so that we can use them on invoices. Excellent. Let's pop into a Realtrac invoice and start using these new codes we just built. I now fire up my client software, and let's say I want to use the tax code on the part for the invoice we were previously looking at. I click on the toolbox and choose the Part Estimates and Job selection. Click over to the Part Editor tab and let's do a search for the part we are invoicing for. I use a search, and once I find my part, I go over to the Account Settings column and assign this part the tax code. Sweet! Now for my QuickBooks purposes, any invoices for this part will automatically use the tax part and not the actual part of the invoice. All right, let's pull up our invoice and tell Realtrac and QuickBooks how we want to handle our freight charges. Once I'm looking at the invoice, I right-click on the freight field and I can choose our new freight item code from the pop-out menu. At this point, we're ready to post this invoice to QuickBooks. We are overriding the item itself on the invoice, along with the freight charges, handling them both in a special manner. Once this invoice posts over to QuickBooks, we can look at the resulting invoice and confirm it looks great. When it comes to purchasing, we have some flexibility as well. Let's take a look at the Realtrac purchase order for a minute. Similar to how an invoice has items, a Realtrac purchase order also has items. Looking at this PO, we see there's only one item on it with an ID of wood screws. When we post this purchase order to QuickBooks, Realtrac will once again look through the QuickBook item list to see if that item is known by QuickBooks. Just like with the invoice, if we cannot find the item, in this case wood screws, then Realtrac will automatically create that item in QuickBooks for you. Since that item now exists in QuickBooks, we have some flexibility in configuring the item. If we pop open my QuickBook item list, we can see I already have wood screws on that list. Let's tweak the account associated with our wood screws. Just for this demonstration, I'm going to tell QuickBooks, and by extension Realtrac, that whenever I make a purchase order for wood screws, I want to consider the expense an automobile expense, not our default office supply expense. All future POs for wood screws will now automatically follow suit.